So there are only two digital assets that you own, your website and your email list. And the email list is a very powerful way to nurture folks, to bring value to people, to remind people of the great experience they had, because it's permission-based. People ask to be put on your email list, and you've got clear way for them to unsubscribe if they wish to. So it helps a lot. And one of the things that always surprises me is people are not putting the investment into their email marketing that they should.
Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhner. Well, if you're looking for insights as an entrepreneur or a student or somebody who wants to supercharge their marketing game, this is going to be the interview for you. We've got James Hipkin, CEO of Red 8 Interactive, a premier custom web development company which focuses on helping small business owners and entrepreneurs to grow their businesses by utilizing the most valuable online asset, their websites. So some of James' clients have included Sprint, Apple, Wells Fargo, Online Bank, Nestle, Toyota, a whole host of amazing big brands. And we're going to talk about how he's been able to take his experience of working with these multi-billion-dollar businesses down to a startup level. So that's very exciting. James, we're going to talk about your book, but first of all, welcome.
Hey, Nicholas, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So I apologize for my rambling introduction, but there's so much going on. You've got a career spanning 40 years. You've obviously worked on some amazing brands. You've got some fantastic experience. And you've got a new book out, which, and I'm going to ruin your surprise here, but it came out on a leap day. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, leap day in February.
Yeah. And it's called Journey to Success, Digital Marketing for Small Business Owners. And I believe you have a copy of it there, which you can wave in front of the camera for our folks to see as well. Look at that. So I'm always excited and very happy to support folks who've taken the time and put their blood, sweat, and tears into a book. So let's maybe talk a little bit about your book and what motivated you to write this.
What motivated me I wrote it during the pandemic when I had time, frankly. It's the conversations that I have with small business owners who know they want to be using digital marketing, but get confused and overwhelmed by all of the choices that are thrown in front of them and all of the conflicting advice they're getting from so many different people. And so what I did is I distilled things down to basic principles. I wrote the book as a parables. It's not a boring business book. It's actually a story about a family, John and his wife and his kids, and they have a custom bike shop. And they were the online world was impacting their business, not in a good way. So they decided, well, we need to do online marketing. And that's the story of the journey that they took from not doing anything at all to being successful with digital marketing. And the mistakes they made and the things they got wrong. They brought in an outside advisor. His name was Kyle, which is my alter ego. And Kyle gave them advice on focus and advice on things to do and the things not to do and how to think about these things. And so it's the story of their journey. The different kids picked up different pieces of the digital marketing puzzle and embraced it. And it's hopefully entertaining. People have told me it's entertaining, but there's a solid message in there for a business owner that first and foremost, it can be done. And second of all, some of the basic principles that you should take into mind, and these are universal. I'm using a bike shop, a retail situation as an example, but the principles are universal and can be applied to almost any business.
Well, I love that it's in parable form and in story form, as you mentioned, versus just, broken down into the sort of very prosaic chapters that most business books go into. Let's talk about how from a marketing perspective, you've marketed this book. I've spoken to a lot of authors. Was this self-published or through a reputable publisher?
It was self-published. The primary purpose of the book is not to market the book. The primary purpose of the book is it functions as a door opener in the sense that it helps establish my authority with podcast hosts like yourself, also with prospective clients. Because the challenge that we face in the web design and development world, honestly, and I'm going to be blunt here, you can't stand on a street corner in a major city and swing a dead cat in a circle and not hit a web designer, right? Everybody claims they can do this. And technically, they probably can because it's not that hard. But should they?
That is the question.
And so I'm using the book to establish that the work that we do is website design and development, but our differentiator is the fact that we understand marketing. We understand how the website can and should be the hub in your hub and spoke strategy, and how it should be the center. It is the doorway where people come. Like, for example, I'll give you a tangible example. When I'll ask a business owner, so what is the primary objective of your website? And they'll give me a litany of things that they want it to do. We'll have a quick conversation about the definition of the word primary. There can only be one. And they'll usually settle in on conversion. It's almost always wrong. For most business owners, the primary objective of the website is not conversion, it's confirmation. People are getting to the website on their journey, and they've heard about your business somehow, and they're going to the website to confirm that you understand their problem and that you are a viable solution for their problem. So confirmation is really the primary objective. Conversion is part of it. You want to give them an opportunity to contact you or sign up for something, that sort of thing. But job one is confirmation, because you can't do any of those other things if they look at this and go, no, this is not for me, and boom, they're gone.
So, James, you've touched on a word there, which is one of my, I don't know what to call it. It's something that I use as a golden thread throughout my entire year's course that I do with digital marketers, and it's the customer journey.
Yes.
And a lot of people, I think, in my experience and in my understanding of marketing, if you have a strong customer journey understanding and you've outlined it and you've broken it down into the various phases, it's very difficult to go wrong, and it's much easier to figure out where there are gaps and issues within your marketing plan. Maybe talk to me about the customer journey, and well, you've touched on it already in terms of confirmation, which I love, and you're absolutely right on website. But how the website will typically fit into the customer journey, because then it folds it nicely in with the concept of why it's not for conversion, or it could be for conversion, but
conversion
why you
may
need to
be an
understand
outcome,
the purpose. Yeah. Why? What is the purpose of your website?
Well, let me give you an example, and then we can circle back to the buyer's journey, because that's something I'm very passionate about as well. But let me give you an example. One of the things I talk about when I'm doing public speaking is I'll stand in front of the room and I'll go, okay, everyone, I want you to stop saying call to action. And that's what happens. They laugh and they get uncomfortable and they look, but everybody in my entire adult life has been telling me I need a call to action. A call to action is a marketer shouting at customers and telling them what to do. Customers don't want to be shouted at, and they don't want to be told what to do. What I suggest is stop calling it a call to action and start calling it a pathway. Effectively, they're exactly the same thing, but the mindset shift is very important. When you start thinking about buttons on your website links in your website as being pathways, what you're doing is you're creating ways that you can support the journey that the customer is on. I'll give you an example. I coached a woman who was a professional keynote speaker. People paid her $10,000 to come and speak to their event, etc. And when we dug into who her target audience was, there were really three distinct groups. There were the event managers who hired her to come and speak for their events. And they had a whole set of things that were important to them. She also did work with corporate HR folks who bring her in to help teach the executives how to be better communicators. And she did one-on-one coaching, mostly with senior female executives who'd been promoted into situations. They've found themselves on stages they didn't know what to do. Other than the gender being the same, there was nothing in common between these three groups. So she created pathways on her website that called out, I sometimes call them people like you pathways, called out to the different groups. And when somebody selects that pathway, because you've reached out to them and you're supporting their journey, two very powerful things have happened. They've told you exactly who they are, and they've given you permission to give them more information. So that's an example of how a website can support the journey that your subsegments in your audience are on in a way. It reminds me of back in the day, I worked with Sprint, is one of the companies you mentioned, and they, in the long distance calling department, this was before there were mobile phones, and we sponsored a research study that investigated loyalty. What was causing people to be loyal? What was causing them to be disloyal? I don't remember any of the details of the output of the research study, but I remember one sentence. The researcher, the guy who specialized in loyalty research, said something in his preamble that just hit me like a hammer. He said, in his experience, 90% of loyalty problems can be traced to a flawed sales process. That was the sentence that got me thinking about pathways. You want to support the journey that they are on, and the website is key to that in this digital world, so that when they make the purchase decision, it's not a sale, it's the next logical step in their journey. That's what generates loyal customers.
The industry has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, the last 2 years, since 1.5 years since ChatGPT has come about, or this preponderance of AI technology. And obviously, prior to that, there's the social media revolution. Before that, websites. And I'm sure, I don't want to be rude, but websites are about 40 years old now as well, I reckon. So the first website sort of came out. So you've gone through that process of where you had to use dial-ups to now where we've got it on our mobile phones. What are from your perspective, the fundamental differences and similarities from when websites started out to where they are now? Because I think that's where folks of your generation have a different insight to folks who are just natively just see websites as a visual thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the reality is the principles haven't changed. You know, there's an old direct marketing axiom that traces back to the dawn of time. Get the right message to the right person at the right time. That's a fundamental principle of marketing. You've got more tools today to do that. You've got more technology you can use to do that. But the tools and technology don't change that fundamental principle. If you can get the right message to the right person when they're looking to be receptive to that message, your marketing is going to be successful. So the key thing that I'm always coaching folks on is understand what your objective is. Understand the relationships between objectives, strategies, and tactics. and how they serve each other and how it all needs to serve who is your best customer and what's the buyer's journey. If you can stay focused and true to those basic principles, then a couple of things happen. Suddenly, a lot of things you're doing, you can stop doing because they really are not serving your best customer. I have a client who was putting a whole lot of energy into TikTok. And all the vanity metrics were there. He was getting great views and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I said, Bobby, have you gotten any sales? No. Meanwhile, some of these other channels that you're not paying attention to are actually generating sales. So another one of the old principles, you've probably heard this before, but somebody asked, what's the key to success? And they expected a long and complicated answer. And the answer was water the flowers and prune the weeds, right? And that in its essence is what marketing is all about. Another thing that we do, one of my marketing VAs who goes on podcasts a lot as well, she talks about using UTM codes to track performance. Are you actually tracking the pathway that folks are on? And it's surprising how many people aren't. And UTM codes are not hard to use. They're not hard to understand. It's easy to add them to a URL, and then you'll have measurement. You'll know that this channel, like for example, Pinterest. We've been pushing folks into Pinterest. Pinterest is a social media platform, but it is also a search engine. And a lot of the same things you can do for SEO can be done on Pinterest, but you don't have nearly the competition. So you're much more likely to see success. And Pinterest is the only social media platform that rewards content for link clicks. Everybody else wants you to stay. Pinterest will bump your post up if you're getting link clicks. And if your goal is to get people to engage with you, don't you want them to click a link?
Well, I was looking at my analytics recently, and it's almost like you've been listening to some of my podcasts and the pearls of wisdom that we've been flinging out there to the masses, because I'm a big Pinterest fan. It's inexpensive. It's the poor cousin of Google and these other social media channels. But I get tremendous visibility. My podcasts, my content, etc., goes onto Pinterest. And as you said, it's a huge search engine. It's probably the second biggest visual search engine in the world. And people engage and spend a lot of time on it. So I totally ascribe to that. You're talking about UTM codes and it's cookies and so on. Obviously, in Europe, I'm in Norway, so we've got the GDPR, so we've got quite strict laws governing what we can and can't do with customer data. And Google is obviously trying quite hard now to make sure that they are compliant with laws in a variety. California's got different laws and different states have different laws. And at the end of the day, it's sales, because you can have Google saying it's made the sale. It could be Facebook that said it's got the sale. So the attribution is quite a tough thing. But the website is the final destination. You basically, you're in control of your website and the data and content. So if you've got good control of your website, you understand that some of these channels might be sort of cooking the books a little bit in terms of where the attribution's coming from. Having a strong website and having a strong understanding of analytics, or folks who understand the analytics of a website, is quite useful.
Very useful. And recognize that these channels that you're dependent on are rented land. They can change the rules and will, and they're not going to call you up and ask you if it's okay. Or the government might change the rules, and they're not going to call you up and ask you if it's okay either.
Yeah.
So there are only two digital assets that you own: your website and your email list. And the email list is a very powerful way to nurture folks, to bring value to people, to remind people of the great experience they had, because it's permission based. People ask to be put on your email list, and you've got clear way for them to unsubscribe if they wish to. So it helps a lot. And one of the things that always surprises me is people are not putting the investment into their email marketing that they should.
James, it's not sexy. And I love the term that you used in terms of vanity metrics. So I wrote it down here because that's totally true. I get thousands of views on my YouTube shorts and on TikTok, but the drive-through is really low. Where I get my traffic from is people going into my contact form on my website and engaging with me there. And to your point, the sort of ugly duckling of the marketing world is email marketing. And I do quite a bit of focus in my course on email marketing because, as you said, people sign up to the list, they're potentially interested, and nobody can take it away from you except if it lands in a junk mail folder. And I've got a great interview with somebody who's a junk folder specialist. So if you ever have a problem with why your perfectly good emails are going to junk folders, you should have a listen to that episode. But maybe talk about one or two successful campaigns you've had with email marketing, because I think people need to realize that it's basically free and is a way of getting your message into real potential buyers' hands. Exactly.
And so much of marketing is about building trust, know, like, and trust. You've probably talked about. People will nod their head. Well, but the vehicle you can use to do that is email marketing because they've asked you to communicate. And you can't abuse it. If all you do is to sell in your email, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I advocate for what I call the 70-20-10 strategy. 70% of your either your email content or your emails, there's lots of different ways to execute the 70-20-10 strategy, but 70% needs to be just delivering value to your audience. This could be telling them about blog posts. This could be articles, about this factor or this thing they should think about. How can you create value for your audience? 20% of the content is what I call curated value. That's where you've got other people's information. In our email marketing, for example, in that 20%, we'll talk about summits that I'm speaking at. We'll talk about podcasts that I've been on, and we'll share that, that podcaster's information because we believe it will be of value to our audience. That's curated content. And then 10% can be sales. And when you maintain that ratio, the sales isn't seen as abusive or annoying. It just becomes part of the mix. You've earned the right to tell them about, and we're doing this thing. Like, for example, one of the things that I see on websites all the time, people don't have an up-to-date privacy policy. And, it's the law. You need to have a privacy policy on your website, and it needs to be up to date because you're at risk if you don't. In the email, I'll say, oh, by the way, we have a service. We'll help you with your privacy policy. That's sales. It's a service that we're selling to our clients, and it's done in the context of the 70-20-10 strategy. As a result, our open rates generally run in the 40% range. We'll have 10% click rates, and we've earned it.
Mm-hmm. And that's about 5 times the average, right?
That's about 5 times the average, yes.
Yeah, nice. So all of the aspects that you've spoken about are ticking boxes. I think I can put a little star of approval saying I agree with everything that James says and that you should listen to James and some of your other content. So get onto that mailing list and listen to some of James's podcasts. But James, that's the business side done. I want to go a little bit into who is James and talk a little bit about your background, because 40 years in this industry, I mean, I can see why you've got grey hair. I'm surprised you've got any left. I've 20 years and I'm sort of catching up to you pretty quick. But maybe just talk through how you got into marketing and any other deviations in your career that you've had that might be interesting for listeners.
Well, it's a funny story. I graduated from college with a music degree. And I know this will shock you, but corporate America does not knock on your door when you have a music degree. And I ended up spending the first 6 years out of college working in the rock and roll industry. I worked with a whole bunch of quite well-known bands. It was fascinating. I was always backstage. Although I had a music degree, my background was classical music. It wasn't rock and roll. So I wasn't on stage. I was always in the back, stage managing, road managing, producing, that kind of thing. I worked with a lot of big bands, and one of those bands was a Canadian band called Rush. And I remember the conversations I had with the lead singer of Rush, the bass player, his name was Geddy Lee. Rush was the first band that was vertically integrated. They owned their own record company, they owned their own publishing, they owned their own sound, they owned their own lights, they owned their own trucks. And when they weren't using the sound and lights and trucks, they were renting them out to other bands. And they used their record company, signed other artists, and the publishing was done for other artists as well. They were completely vertically integrated. And this was back in the 1980s, right? Very innovative. Now, Taylor Swift is doing that today. And everybody think, my God, she's brilliant. But Rush was doing it back in the 1980s. And it was the conversations I had with Geddy Lee about this that opened my mind that, maybe I could work in business with my music degree. Because the thing about, and the reason I ended up in marketing was, when you think about it, marketing is a very linear and logical thing. But in order to be done well, it needs to be interpreted laterally. Music is a very linear and logical thing. But to do it well, you need to interpret it laterally. The classic 12-bar blues, right? It's 12 bars, it's a chord progression, it doesn't change. And yet tens of thousands of artists have been able to produce fantastic music using that simple structure. So that's what got me into marketing. And I went about getting a job as a junior account executive at an ad agency. And that's what started my career. But that ability to be both linear and lateral at the same time, which is an inherent characteristic of musicians and music, has served me very well in the world of marketing.
Well, I guess from that musical background, which is obviously quite structured and logical, website and website development is almost a logical step, and the analytics side as well, because it's it's quite a logical process. And again, following in that customer journey discussion we had, there are basic steps, and then you need to do your riffing and do your interpretations on top of that. And no one customer journey is the same.
No one customer journey is the same. But I audit websites. The number one problem I see, it's not design, it's not copy, although that's often a problem too. But the number one most important problem I see is an absence of strategy. When you have a clear understanding of who your audience is and what's their journey, it's much easier to craft something that's going to be supportive. It's going to attract the right people for the right reasons.
And I suppose all of these ready-made websites and templates don't help, because a lot of people will start with a template with a landing page, about us, contact, etc. And that might not be the right avenue for you. So speaking to folks like yourself who I suppose, understand who the customer is, look at the customer journey. We're not going to have time to go through funnels and marketing and sales funnels, but we can maybe do that on another chat. But those are obviously things that you need to look at in terms of how your website can help deliver a good pathway for customers.
Exactly. The non-icky marketing funnel is another topic that I love to talk about.
So we'll have that on another session, but I want to just show you, if I can move my screen down. Can I move it down? No. Well, I've got my enormous keyboard behind me, and I play a bit of Bach every now and then, and you're talking about those 12 notes. It's amazing what you can do just with 88 keys. Not even 88 keys. Bach used obviously less than that, 58 or whatever.
Yep.
But just amazing what you can do on a keyboard. So you mentioned blues. Is that what you're doing, or was classical music your thing? And are you still involved in music? Do you play any instrument? Is it still part of your life?
It's still part of my life as a listener. It was classical music primarily, and that's one of the other piece of preparation that was useful. Performing on stages all through high school and all through college and even after college. I'm one of those annoying people that the stage is my happy place. Put me in front of an audience and I couldn't be happier. Attribute that to my background in performing in music. I remember in high school, I had a solo and I hit a wrong note. I was all freaked out because I hit a wrong note. I was talking to people afterwards and they all were very complimentary, said you did a great job. And I look, didn't you hear the wrong note? And they're like, no. Just have no fear. Just get up on stage and be your authentic self and it will be fine.
That's such a funny story. And I know exactly what you mean, because you'll hear it and you'll go, my world is ended. That's supposed to be a C, F sharp or something. Oh, no. And most people are ignorant of the music. They haven't heard it 5,000 times like you have, and they're just enjoying the moment, enjoying the music. But there will obviously have been one or two people rolling their eyes and going, "Oh, not James again," making that one note mistake. I'm one of those. I'm very bad. But can you remember what is your party piece in terms of a classical piece that you still play, James?
It's a little bit dark, but the backstory is so interesting. His name was Messiaen, and he was a French composer, Jewish, and ended up in a concentration camp in World War II. And he wrote, there were other musicians there, and he wrote this piece of music called the Quartet for the End of Time. Mm-hmm. With four of the oddest combination of instruments that you could imagine. And it's because those are the three other musicians that were there with him. And it's a haunting, beautiful piece of music with an amazing story. It is both dark and uplifting at the same time. It is well worth a listen. It's not a well-known piece of music. It's not something that is going to be on anybody's hit parade. And my other favorite song is a rock and roll song by an English artist named Peter Gabriel. And it's when he does his song about Salisbury Hill. And Salisbury Hill is all about, a spaceship arrives. Would you get on the spaceship?
Well, those are two very different pieces. Olivier Messiaen, his orchestral work is almost incomprehensible. But one of the introductions, sort of like this wall of sound in the beginning, not for everyone, as
it is not for
as
everyone.
You mentioned. And Peter Gabriel, did he do Tubular Bells? I can't remember if that's the.
No, that's somebody else.
I'm sure it's another Gabriel. Anyway, but. James, we're going to have to exchange YouTube or Apple Music playlists so that we can listen to our strange concoctions or strange choices of music, and maybe some folks would find some interesting pieces that they've never heard before. But it's been a real pleasure chatting to you, and let's have another chat about the marketing and sales funnel, because I think that's obviously critical to business success, and something that if you've got the amount of experience you've got and the types of clients that you've worked with would be able to give some real good insights for how folks can shortcut that process if they're starting out their business. So thanks so much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure, Nicholas. I'm looking forward to chatting again with you soon.